Have you ever looked at your blood sugar and thought, it's a little high, but I'll deal with it later? Because what most people don't realize is this: every spike, even the ones you ignore, is quietly damaging something far more serious than your energy levels. It's putting real accumulating pressure on your kidneys. And the most dangerous part, kidney damage doesn't come with pain. It doesn't give you a warning. It builds silently in the background until one day your numbers don't just go up, your options start to go down. I'm Dr. Johnny, and I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes because I'm going to show you something that almost no one explains clearly: a simple, inexpensive fiber you can find in nearly any grocery store that can block up to 40% of the sugar from your meals before it even reaches your bloodstream, reducing not just your blood sugar spikes, but the hidden stress those spikes place on your kidneys every single day. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your body every time you eat, you'll realize this isn't just about controlling glucose anymore. It's about protecting your kidneys before it's too late. Most people think blood sugar is just about energy. You eat, it digests, and sugar goes into your blood. But what almost no one tells you is this: every time that sugar enters too fast, your kidneys are forced to filter it under pressure. I once had a patient say, "My sugar isn't that high, so I should be fine, right?" But that's the misunderstanding. It's not just the number. It's the speed of the spike. When food leaves your stomach, it becomes a semi-liquid mixture. And the thickness of that mixture determines how fast sugar hits your bloodstream. Studies show that up to 35% of your blood sugar spike depends on how quickly your stomach empties. And here's why that matters for your kidneys when sugar floods in too fast. Your filtration system, especially the glomeruli, has to work harder, creating silent damage over time. But when that flow is slowed, your kidneys aren't overwhelmed. They're protected. So this isn't just about what you eat, it's about how fast your body processes it and how much stress that puts on your kidneys with every single meal. But knowing this alone isn't enough, because there's another factor even more dangerous that most people completely overlook. And this is where everything begins to shift, because once you understand it's not just about sugar levels, but the speed of that sugar, the next question becomes, what if you could slow it down before it ever stresses your kidneys? I remember a patient telling me I didn't change my meals, but suddenly my numbers felt more stable, and I didn't feel that crash anymore. What changed wasn't the food, it was the flow. A simple fiber called psyllium husk, when mixed with water, forms a thick gel inside your digestive system. And that gel does something powerful. It turns a fast, damaging sugar surge into a slow, controlled release. Research shows that increasing the viscosity of what's inside your gut can significantly reduce how quickly glucose enters your bloodstream. And when that flow slows down, your kidneys, especially those tiny filtration units called glomeruli, are no longer overwhelmed by sudden spikes. Instead of being forced into overdrive, they can process blood more steadily, reducing long-term strain. That's when people start to notice something different. Not just better numbers, but a sense of stability they haven't felt in years. But knowing this alone isn't enough, because there's another mechanism even more powerful that directly changes how much sugar your body produces in the first place. And once that gel reaches your stomach, something even more important begins to happen. Your entire digestive rhythm slows down in a way that directly protects your kidneys. I remember a patient in his late 60s who told me, "For the first time, I don't feel that sudden spike and crash after eating. It's like my body finally has time to keep up." What changed wasn't his medication, it was how fast his stomach was emptying. When psyllium absorbs water, it expands dramatically, up to 40 times its weight, creating a thick, bulky gel that signals your stomach to slow the release of food into your intestines. And this matters more than most people realize. Studies show that gastric emptying can account for around 35% of how high your blood sugar rises after a meal. Now think about that from a kidney perspective. When sugar enters slowly, your kidneys aren't hit with a sudden overload of glucose to filter. The glomeruli can work at a steady pace instead of being pushed into overdrive. Over time, that difference can mean less microdamage, less stress, and better long-term kidney protection. But knowing this alone isn't enough, because there's another mechanism, even more direct, that determines how much sugar is created in the first place. And even if you slow the flow of sugar, there's another critical layer. Most people never think about how much sugar your body actually creates from the food you eat. I once had a patient tell me I switched to healthier carbs, smaller portions. but my numbers still spike. And that's because the real issue isn't just what you eat, it's how aggressively your body breaks it down into glucose. The key player here is an enzyme called alpha amylase, which rapidly converts starch into sugar. But when psyllium forms that thick gel in your digestive system, it physically interferes with this process. It's like trying to mix ingredients in water versus honey in water. Everything happens instantly, but in a thick gel, everything slows down. Research shows that increasing the viscosity of this digestive mixture can reduce carbohydrate breakdown by up to 35%. That means less glucose is produced from the exact same meal. And from a kidney perspective, that's huge. Less sugar created means less filtration pressure, less strain on the glomeruli, and less long-term damage building silently over time. But knowing this alone isn't enough because there's another mechanism even more subtle that controls how much sugar actually gets absorbed into your bloodstream. And even after less sugar is created, there's still one final checkpoint that determines how much actually reaches your bloodstream, and this is where most people completely lose control without realizing it. I remember a patient telling me, I eat the same meals as my friend, but my numbers are always higher. What she didn't realize is that absorption, not just digestion, is where the real difference happens. Inside your small intestine are millions of tiny structures called villi, and they act like gatekeepers, deciding how fast sugar enters your blood. Between your food and those villi is a thin fluid layer, almost like a buffer zone. When psyllium forms its gel, it thickens that layer, creating a physical barrier that slows sugar from crossing into your bloodstream. This isn't about chemistry, it's pure physics. Studies have shown that when this gel layer is disrupted, the blood sugar lowering effect disappears entirely. No gel, no protection. And for your kidneys, this step is critical because every bit of sugar that gets delayed is one less surge your filtration system has to handle. Over time, that means less stress, less microscopic damage, and more protection where it matters most. But knowing this alone isn't enough because there's another effect that continues working long after your meal is over. And this is where things become even more surprising because the protection doesn't stop when your meal is over. It carries forward. I remember a patient who told me I only took it in the morning, but my numbers were better even at lunch. I didn't understand why. What he experienced is something researchers call the second meal effect. In one controlled study, participants took psyllium before breakfast and dinner, but not before lunch. And yet their blood sugar at lunch still dropped by up to 31%. That means the impact of that gel continues hours after you consume it, influencing digestion hormone signaling and how your body processes carbohydrates throughout the day. And from a kidney perspective, this is powerful because your kidneys aren't just being protected during one meal, they're being shielded across multiple meals without additional effort. It's like reducing repeated stress before it has a chance to build up. And when you realize that one small action can create a lasting protective effect, you start to see this isn't just control, it's strategy. But knowing this alone isn't enough because what happens next goes deeper. And it directly affects the number that worries most people every single morning. And this is where everything becomes real because it's no longer just about what happens after meals. It's about the number you wake up to every single morning. I remember a patient telling me I can manage my meals during the day, but why is my fasting sugar still high? And that's the number that frustrates people the most because it feels completely out of their control. But here's what the research shows. In a large meta-analysis of 35 clinical trials, people with type 2 diabetes who use psyllium consistently before meals saw their fasting blood glucose drop by an average of 37 milligrams per deciliter. That's not a small change. That's the kind of reduction doctors look for when adjusting medication. And from a kidney perspective, this matters even more than most people realize. Because that fasting number reflects what your body's doing overnight when your kidneys are still filtering your blood, still being exposed to elevated glucose without you even knowing it. Lower fasting glucose means less continuous stress on your filtration system, less silent damage building hour after hour while you sleep. And when that number starts to come down, it's not just progress, it's protection. But knowing this alone isn't enough because there's another long-term marker that determines how much damage is really being done over time. And this brings us to the number that tells the real story over time, your A1C. Because while daily readings can fluctuate, A1C reflects what your body and your kidneys have been dealing with for months. I remember a patient saying, "My numbers look okay most days, but my A1C never really improves." And that's the hidden danger. Damage can still be happening even when things seem under control. Now here's where this changes. In that same meta-analysis, Psyllium didn't just lower short-term glucose, it reduced A1C by nearly a full percentage point, about 0.97%. And if you've ever tracked your A1C, you know how significant that is. From a kidney perspective, this is critical because A1C is directly linked to long-term microvascular damage, including damage to the glomeruli, the tiny filtration units that keep your blood clean. The higher your A1C, the more pressure those structures endure over time. So when that number drops, it's not just a statistic, it's a reduction in cumulative stress on your kidneys. And that's when people begin to realize they're not just managing a condition, they're slowing down potential damage. But knowing this alone isn't enough because the final mechanism, the one most people have never heard of, may be the most powerful of all. And now we reach the mechanism that brings everything together, the one that truly changes how your body experiences a meal and how much stress your kidneys have to thermal afterward. Because up to this point, we've talked about slowing digestion, reducing sugar production, and limiting absorption. But what happens when all of these effects combine at once? You get what researchers call a gel trap. I had a patient pause and say, "So you're telling me the same meal can hit my body in a completely different way just because of this?" And the answer is yes. In a 2022 review on soluble fibers, scientists measured the total amount of glucose entering the bloodstream after a meal. When a viscous gel-forming fiber like psyllium was present, that number dropped by up to 41%. Same food, same portion, but nearly half the sugar never reached the bloodstream during that critical window. And from a kidney perspective, that's massive because that's up to 41% less filtration pressure, less strain on the glomeruli, and less long-term damage accumulating silently over time. It's not just control, it's protection before damage even begins. But knowing this alone isn't enough because once you see how powerful this is, the next question becomes, why hasn't this been the first thing you were told? And that question is the one that makes a lot of people stop and think. Because once you see numbers like that, 41% less sugar, nearly a full point drop in A1C fasting glucose reduced significantly, the next thought is unavoidable. Why wasn't this the first thing I was told to protect my kidneys? I've had patients tell me, "Dr. Johnny, I've been managing this for years, and no one ever explained it this way." And the truth is, it's not because doctors don't care. Most are working within a system that prioritizes speed protocols and prescriptions. They have limited time-structured guidelines, and those guidelines often focus on managing blood sugar after the fact, not preventing the stress that damages your kidneys in the first place. Fiber gets mentioned, but rarely explained as a frontline defense for kidney protection. And there's another reality. This isn't something that can be patented or heavily marketed. It's simple. It's inexpensive. And because of that, it often stays in the background. But once you understand the mechanism, once you see how directly it reduces the burden on your kidneys, it stops being optional and starts becoming foundational. But knowing this alone isn't enough, because if you use it the wrong way, you could miss the benefit entirely or even create new risks without realizing it. And this is where many people unintentionally lose the benefit, because even something powerful when used the wrong way can fail to protect your kidneys the way it should. I remember a patient telling me, "I tried it, but nothing really changed." And when we looked closer, the problem wasn't the fiber, it was how it was being used. The first mistake, and the most critical, is taking psyllium at the same time as your medication. That gel doesn't just slow sugar, it can also bind to medications and reduce how much your body absorbs. That means your treatment may not work as intended, which can indirectly increase stress on your kidneys over time. The second mistake is not drinking enough water. Without enough fluid, psyllium can't form the proper gel, and instead of helping, it can cause discomfort or even digestive issues. The third mistake is relying on capsules, which often don't create the same consistent gel effect seen in studies. And the fourth is starting too fast, overwhelming your system before it can adapt. These details may seem small, but they determine whether your kidneys are being protected or left exposed. But knowing this alone isn't enough, because once you avoid these mistakes, the next step is knowing exactly how to use this correctly to truly reduce the pressure on your kidneys every single day. And this is where everything becomes practical, because once you understand the science and avoid the mistakes, what really matters is how you apply it in your daily life. I remember a patient telling me, "Just give me something simple I can follow. I don't want to overthink this anymore." And that's exactly the point. This doesn't need to be complicated to protect your kidneys. Start with one simple step. About 15 minutes before your largest meal of the day, take 1 teaspoon of psyllium husk powder, around 3.5 grams, and mix it into a full glass of water. Stir it quickly, drink it before it thickens too much, and then follow it with another glass of water. That alone begins to slow the sugar surge that would otherwise place pressure on your kidneys. After about a week, if your body feels comfortable, add a second dose before another meal. This gradual approach allows your system to adapt while steadily reducing the load on your filtration system. And here's what most people overlook: track your numbers. Check your fasting glucose each morning and watch for trends, because those numbers reflect how much stress your kidneys are experiencing over time. When you start to see them shift even slightly, you're not just improving a reading. You're actively protecting your kidneys. But knowing this alone isn't enough, because what happens overnight while you sleep may be the most important factor of all. If you've watched this far, I want you to understand something clearly. You're not behind and you're not failing your health. You're learning what most people were never taught. Protecting your kidneys doesn't start when something goes wrong. It starts with small decisions you make every single day, especially how you manage your blood sugar before it quietly causes damage. So take this seriously, but don't feel overwhelmed. Start simple. Give your body the support it needs, reduce the stress on your kidneys meal by meal, and most importantly, stay consistent. That's where real change happens. And here's what I want you to do next. Save this video so you can come back and follow these steps the right way, because this isn't just information, it's something you can actually apply. And if you want more clear, practical, research-based insights like this focused on protecting your kidneys and improving your long-term health, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep sharing what most people don't hear in a typical doctor's visit. You still have time to protect your kidneys. You still have time to change your numbers. And with the right knowledge, your body can move in the right direction again. Stay with me and let's take control of your health one step at a time.